This is Shawn Lam for Streaming Media Producer, and this is a sponsored tutorial for videoguys.com of the Grass Valley ADVC-G1 converter. Now, Grass Valley markets this converter as an any-in to 3G SDI converter, but specifically they mean it's an HDMI input, DVI input, and analog video input converter. So the DVI-I stands for integrated, the I part of it. And integrated includes both analog and digital, both single and dual link DVI standards. So the DVI digital side isn't too terribly exciting. It's very similar to HDMI. But for me, the exciting part is the A side, the analog side, because it can be converted to VGA input using a very simple adapter like this one here that has DVI on one side and VGA on the other side. These are very inexpensive adapters. Probably you already have a few sitting around in your studio. I seem to have a bunch of them sitting around here. They come with your video cards and whatnot. It might sound a little bit strange to be talking about VGA in 2014 and saying it's exciting, but unfortunately a lot of the presentation world, when it comes to IMAG and powering projectors, that world is still run on the VGA standard for a variety of reasons, which we're not really going to go into today, but we need, as video producers that are doing live switching and incorporating computer inputs, we need to be working with the VGA standard and converting that analog standard to a digital standard that our video switchers can handle. Now, some video switchers have built-in scan converters, which is what's required to convert VGA to the internal standard that's going to be worked with. If you don't have that, then you're going to need a converter like this that can convert that VGA to your output, which in this case is SDI, but there's also converters that can do HDMI as well, and those are really the two digital standards that video switchers are built around. On the audio side, you can work with the embedded HDMI audio as well as a 1/4-inch tip ring sleeve analog input or AES or EBU digital audio inputs, so you can embed that into the output if you'd like as well. On the output side, the ADVC-G1 supports two HDSDI outputs that are 3G. Now, the 3G HDSDI standard simply means that it supports resolutions of up to 1920 by 1080 at 60 progressive frames per second. The 1.5G standard does not support those progressive frames. It maxes out at 60i. There are a few different options available in terms of signal processing, and two of the interesting ones are a 3D NR, or 3D noise reduction. And so this is really useful when you're working with compressed codecs, generally on playback from a non-live source. If your source camera is a small sensor type of camera, a 1/3-inch sensor, or if you're working in high gain or high ISO environments, or even when you're up converting from an analog source to that digital or frame size. All of those scenarios can produce a little bit of noise or a lot of noise when you're up converting and processing. So using a bit of noise reduction really goes a long way, and it's important when you're webcasting, especially because you're using a very small bitrate and compressed codec, high compression ratio, and the more noise takes away from your details. The higher signal to noise ratio, the better. The second image processing feature is image enhance, and that's a detail enhancement. It increases the sharpness. And so you don't want to be using that in conjunction with a high noise environment, but if you already have a very clean signal to begin with that's noise free, you may want some additional sharpness in there. There's two things that the Grass Valley ADVC-G1 doesn't do, and the first is frame rate conversion. So if your input source is 1920 by 1080 30p, you can't output 60i or 60p as a frame rate. Same as if you have a 60p or a 60i input, you can't output 30p. The second is that it does not support pass-throughs. So if you have a HDMI, a VGA, or any of the analog video inputs, you can't output the same input as a pass-through. The only outputs are those HDSDI. So they're not real big limitations, but you just have to be aware that these are in place. The Grass Valley ADVC-G1 converter has a variety of different inputs on the front here, and The active input is selected on the back. We'll go into that in a moment. There's dials and dip switches to control the settings, but the active setting on the front is indicated by an LED light. It's solid when that input is active and stable, and it's flashing when you've selected that input as your input of choice, but the input is not stable or not there yet. There's also a light for the up conversion. There's video input lights and audio input lights that indicate whether the signal is stable, selective but not active yet, and if the up conversion is turned on. On the back of the converter, there's three things I want to talk about. The first is the locking mechanism on the power adapter plug. So I can't unintentionally pull this out, but if I retract the sheath here, it pulls out fairly easily. The second thing I want to talk about on the back of the unit are the audio and video select buttons located right here and here. These are dials that need to be manually turned using a precision screwdriver. And the reason we have these here is because the unit does not have an auto detect or select feature, and there's no external buttons to toggle between the available inputs. The inputs, the cheat code for that is on the back of the unit here, so it walks you through which inputs are available and which number they correspond to. And finally, that brings us to the third thing on the back of the converter, which is the selections for the dip switches. Now, the dip switches allow you to switch signal processing. So whether it's the output resolution you want to adjust or the signal processing like image enhancing or noise reduction, those are controlled on the back here. The last thing I want to leave you with on this videoguys.com tutorial of the Grass Valley ADVC-G1 converter is a VGA conversion. So the VGA output from my laptop is going into the converter using a simple VGA to DVI converter. The output is HD-SDI, and that's going into my recorder and monitor. And as you can see, there's a valid and high definition digital output that's coming out of there. So that conversion is complete. Now, I do want to point out a few caveats and warnings. It's important in a video workflow to consider all of the video resolutions that you're going to be given and working with, and to make sure that they're compatible with your hardware. This still is true for the ADVC-G1 converter. It does support a wide range of video resolutions, but there are some video resolutions that you might be given that aren't specifically supported. On the HDMI and the DVI-D side, pretty much everything that you'll be given, it should be able to handle, because mostly you're going to be working with digital high definition video inputs like 1920 by 1080 or 1280 by 720. But when it comes to the DVI-A standard, otherwise convertible to VGA, there's a variety of resolutions that you may be given from computers that are not supported. Of the supported DVI-A video resolutions, there's only one that's widescreen, and that's 1360 by 768. That's a proper widescreen video resolution. Unfortunately, it's not the default resolution that you'll find on most video cards output, including this laptop here. My laptop supports natively 1366 by 768 and not 1360 by 768. There's only a 6 pixel difference in there, but when it comes to conversion and standard compliance, if it's the wrong resolution, it just won't work in the workflow. So you've got to make sure that you're able to output a 1360 by 768 video resolution if you want to maintain that widescreen aspect ratio from computer inputs. This has been a video tutorial of the Grass Valley ADVC-G1 video converter for streaming media producer. For more information on this video converter, please check out videoguys.com, our tutorial sponsor. Thank you very much. My name is Shawn Lam.
VideoGuys.com is your source for streaming media and live production equipment, storage, and video editing hardware and software. We have specialized in video editing and production for more than 25 years, and our technicians are available to answer your questions and help you find the best solution for your needs and budget.